Hello, data family. Happy Friday. So, this is an introduction to today's Data Squad podcast. And in this episode, we have a new guest speaker. Her name is Kelly Hotta. She is a sales consultant at Snowflake. And the topic of the day is the cloud revolution. So, we're going to be talking to Kelly about what she's seen in the market happening, especially with companies moving to the cloud, with companies adopting data warehouse technology in the cloud, and how Snowflake compare to others in the market. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you want to know more about this kind of stuff, let me know in the comments, or just send me an email to christian@datasquad.com.au, and I will be replying you with some tips. Also, our academy is going to be open very soon. We are accepting students right now, so I'm going to be putting also the link below. Okay? So enjoy the podcast. I will see you next Friday. Welcome to another podcast episode. Today is the cloud revolution. That's the topic of the day. And with us, we have Kelly Hotta. And welcome, Kelly Hotta. Right? I don't know exactly, but you can fix that for me, please. So Kelly and I know each other from our time at Tableau. And, I've been following her for a few years, not stalking, but just following, the career. And I think it's a great guest to have. I love her story. I love what she's doing in terms of career-wise. So it's a pleasure to have you, Kelly, today talking to me. And for all the audience out there, we are going to be discussing cloud things today and why companies should move to the cloud. What are Kelly's thoughts on how the pandemic has been affecting that journey for companies. So thank you for being here, Kelly.
Thanks for having me.
That's great. Okay, so let's start by knowing you a little more. So I was looking at your profile, right? And you have done a number of things during your career. And if we go all the way back to 2011, you were the co-owner of the Touch the Toes. That's an online business. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, my kind of career path has been fairly unconventional. Tech kind of came into the scene pretty late for me. And you're right, in 2001, I co-founded what was basically a retail shop, a specialty retail store, which also kind of turned into a bit of a workshop space. And so our focus was really on sustainability, eco-friendly consumerism surrounding yoga, and I guess that whole movement. And so it was just my friend and I who met at yoga, and we decided to open Touch the Toes. I'm not involved currently with them since moving to Australia, but very good learning experience.
Yeah, you have like a little entrepreneur spirit then.
Yeah, I like seeing things from, I guess, building things and starting things up. I find that pretty exciting. At the same time, I was actually helping my dad with his startup in Singapore as well. So that one was more around sourcing produce for hotels and restaurants and being a distributor in the F&B space. So I kind of had a bunch of things going on at once.
Yeah, cool. And then I saw that you moved to Tableau, to Australia, and you started working with Tableau for a few years, right? Pretty much like 4.5 years. So how was that?
Yeah, so I was with Tableau originally in Singapore, but I was covering the ANZ market. So I was the first commercial pre-sales person they hired. And then I guess it was 2.5 years into that, I moved down to Sydney and then was here with them for 2 years before joining Snowflake.
Okay, so now you are with Snowflake. So can you tell us more about Snowflake, what it is, and especially for people out there who doesn't know anything about cloud technologies or they're just starting to look into it? What can you tell us about Snowflake?
Sure. So I guess at a really high level, Snowflake is a platform that utilizes the cloud to provide an analytical data warehouse, data lake, kind of an all-encompassing layer that because it was built for the cloud, has the scalability, the flexibility, and the speed that was really, the cloud was really able to deliver. So the other thing about Snowflake, I guess, that we like to point out is that it is full ANSI SQL, and what that means is it's really approachable. It's very familiar to users who already have SQL skills. And so obviously in a time like this, especially, right, like having the skills to pick a technology up that is as new, relatively new, is paramount. And so I think it fits right in very nicely with a skill set that already exists.
Yes. So, well, going back to my own experience, when I started my career in early 2000s, everything was on premises. The concept of cloud wasn't. It was just other people's computers. You would call it data centers. Now everybody calls it cloud, but I understand it's different. But I remember, most of companies will have their SQL server or an Oracle installation on site, on premises. So it's interesting to see how these cloud technologies are revolutionizing the industry and changing it in, I would say, in a better way. I'm a big fan of the cloud technologies because they give you that flexibility, right? Now, we were talking before why companies should move to the cloud, and you mentioned that it's not about that anymore. It's not about why people and why companies should move their data to the cloud. It's about why you are not doing it faster. So what is your take on that? Especially under COVID situation, what do you see happening in the market right now?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, and maybe it's partially because of the current pandemic, but pretty much everyone is in that agreement that cloud is really where they need to be. And of course, it's an unfortunate circumstance for something like a realization like that. But I do think that COVID has opened up a lot of people's eyes fully. The things that people saw as traditionally very safe and secure and within their control were, all of a sudden pulled out from under them. And so I think looking at what happened, companies that had the benefit and the foresight to run everything in the cloud operationally were really able to adapt to the new normal much quicker than those who were still living in the old world. And so, I mean, Snowflake, for example, right, as a company, we've always run everything in the cloud. And so the transition that we had was probably much smoother and less disruptive than what I can imagine some of the other other organizations might have had.
So
I really think that rather than why should I move to the cloud, it's really becoming on the question of how should I do it.
Now, when I talk to people, they are usually there are two way of thinking about the cloud, and there's the promoters and the people who really love it and they are moving as fast as they can. And then there's also detractors of the idea, right? And the main reason they usually bring up is cost, right? It's too expensive. So what is your take on that, especially with data warehouses? Do you think it's something prohibitive especially for medium companies, small companies to move to the cloud? That could be maybe one challenge why they're not moving, or you think in terms of cost and it's similar to having an on-premise with the people that need to run everything?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends again who you're talking to. I mean, those smaller companies, in some cases, it can seem like overkill potentially, right? To have a huge cloud data warehouse for the things that they're trying to do. That being said, I mean, Snowflake and a lot of other cloud platforms, have a billing model that does scale. It does start pretty small and matches usage. And so from that perspective, I feel like the costing model has changed, and in a lot of ways, it fits the priorities, the financial priorities of smaller companies better than the old model did. The other thing is, thinking about cost not just in terms of actual dollars, but the time, and right.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the full cost model, you can't just look at it in isolation. And so, yeah, cost is always it does come up,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's something we lead with usually, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. So let's move on to more like challenges. And
Mhm.
so it's have you seen any, well, beside the challenge that we all know, right? What other challenges have you seen people or companies struggling with? And if you can share maybe some project that you're working today that you have seen some interesting challenges, tell us a little more about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, the range is huge. One challenge that I think comes up quite a lot is kind of has to do with, again, the how. So when you talk to customers about, their move to the cloud,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think we forget to ask them to define what that means to them. And
Okay.
if someone says they have a cloud project or a cloud transformation, or
Yeah.
these are all great words, but if you ask them what that really means, you get very different answers, is
Oh,
what I've
okay.
found. And so, I mean, because of that, I think, if you think about a customer who thinks about cloud just like, well, I'm going to take my SQL servers and everything that I have right now on prem and just port it over to AWS, or I'm going to port it over to Azure. Like, that's their version of cloud transformation. That's not going to be the same as someone who is, taking this as an opportunity to rethink what they had assumed in the past to be true. And so, an associated challenge with the first approach, which is, again, taking what they have and just moving it to the cloud, is that yes, they'll get some benefit, of course, from a operational, from an administrative point of view, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But the challenge becomes that they're still using the old tool sets, the old approaches,
Gotcha.
and trying to fit them into this cloud model. And that doesn't always work. And I think it's
Yeah.
similar to what we used to see at Tableau, right? I
Mm.
mean, as soon as you see a customer take
Translating
a
in
BI
Excel.
tool
Yeah.
and exactly just treat it like, oh, it's like Excel, it's a faster Excel, then you're not really going to see the same level of benefit as you would if you were a customer who was looking at it with fresh eyes. And so it's the same sort of challenge that I used to
Okay.
see a lot at Tableau.
And how do you think people can overcome the challenge? Is it an education thing? Is it a training?
Ah, it's the
That's
big
probably a bigger
question.
question, right? But maybe a few tips, like, how, because
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
people want to learn, but they don't know where to start.
yes. Again, quite similar to the approach that maybe we took at some of the engagements we had at Tableau, but thinking a little bit about the questions that people are trying to answer and the real problems, right? I mean, it's sometimes a hard question because
Mm.
not a lot of people can articulate to you what's wrong and the effect and the impact that that problem is having. And again,
Yeah.
that's something that you need the right people in the room, and you need to have the conversation to be able to get the answers. And so I think the first step is just having that conversation,
Yeah.
not just with your customers and your clients, but also the organizations themselves have to start those conversations, because without that, you have no basis to go off, right? So yeah, that would be, I mean, the first thing I think is just having the dialogue. The second is, I guess, try making it a point to take everything and forgetting it
Just
exists
forget
and
it.
starting from zero,
Yeah.
just
Throw it out of
even
the
as an
window.
exercise.
Forget it. Start over.
Because yeah,
Mm.
if you're working in a world where that was the constraint, how can you think outside it, without getting
Yeah.
outside that world? And so, yeah, so doing that and being really mindful about doing that. So one thing I do is when customers, tell me that they're just moving to cloud because it's going to make their IT process more efficient, that's not going to have the same benefit that
Okay. It's a
maybe,
valid point, but it shouldn't be the
yeah,
reason why you are moving to the cloud, I guess, right?
yeah. And I think for us, our part of our role is to challenge them on that.
Yeah.
And not be afraid to point that out, because I think often people just say, yep, and then go along with it. But I don't know. I've never been that way. I can never just sit there and say, okay, and nod my head. So maybe that's
Yeah.
just something I have to also work on. But
So
I always like to challenge that. Yeah.
on that point, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Who is more difficult to convince? An IT person, or a business? Because you are dealing with both, I'm assuming, right? In your daily work.
Yeah.
Business people, they have the vision, the transformation in their minds, but then you have to talk to the DBA, to the database administrator there that has been there for 20 years, that maybe doesn't know anything about cloud, and they're like resistant, you know. Tell me a bit more about that. How do you deal with that situation when you have to, convey the message that is coming from executives to the people who is
Right.
actually doing the work?
I couldn't say a generalized one is worse than the, or one is harder, sorry, than the other. I
The
think
worst. Yeah.
not worse, sorry.
Okay. No,
One
no,
is
that's right.
harder to
Harder.
convince than the other. One is more difficult.
Yeah.
I think, look, I guess my coming into Snowflake, I assumed, I had my own assumptions actually, that it would be harder to convince DBAs and people
Okay.
on that side on IT, because I think there's a perception that IT is generally like rigid in the thinking, and they have processes and they do these. They've been doing this for 20 years, and don't
Yeah.
tell them how to do you know what I mean. But I don't think that was fair in retrospect.
Mm,
I think I'm always very pleasantly surprised when I meet data DBAs, data engineers, people that are really building the pipelines,
yeah.
and managing all of the infrastructure, the data flows, and all of that. Like, when I speak to those people, and they get it,
Mm,
it's game changing, because they understand. They say, we don't want to do all these plumbing type activities. We don't want to be vacuuming our data warehouse and waiting 6 hours over we want to be able to do all this in real time. We want to deliver things to the business that they actually need. And so there's a lot of people on that side that are thinking in these ways. And so I think what's really exciting being in our position is that we can provide them with a platform that enables it, like truly
yeah.
enables it. It's not just a sales pitch. People use it and they say, wow, it actually works. And we hear that a lot. It's like, it just works. And I can do my job that much better now. And it's freed them in what
Yes.
I've heard from a
I
lot of
mean,
them, right? It's
ideally,
freed them
yes.
from that. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, there are obviously cases where people have almost pinned their own reputations, their careers, their whatever, on something that they have a vested interest in
Of
keeping.
course.
And that
Yeah.
thing is huge, and it's not a matter of just pulling it out. And so,
And that happens across the board. It's not just with you and Snowflake. It's across everything,
oh
right?
yeah,
Tableau, we used to see
yep,
the same thing. It's the
yep.
resistance of changing. That's something that human nature is not really good at, changing, right?
I
Especially when the change is
exactly.
rapid, it's fast, it's going to the opposite direction. We tend to be more resistant, and that's happened to all
Oh
of
yeah,
us. So in that,
oh yeah.
that's going to give me the perfect start to the next topic, which is tips and
Mm.
recommendations. And as I mentioned before, in this group that I'm trying to form, that's
Mm-hmm.
what we want our people to be on top of everything, technology, but also the human-centric piece. So what would you recommend to first someone who is in that position in a company that there's maybe deciding moving to the cloud and they're like a little bit afraid, they don't know what's going to happen to them? What can they do now today to prepare for that change? And it could be anything. I mean, of course, you're going to tell us more about Snowflake and maybe the educational program that you provide, but in general, in any cloud technology that is going to replace what they've been doing for 10, 15 years, how can people prepare for that?
Yeah, it's a big question. And I think what I've sort of, I guess, learned, just over the years is that from a vendor's point of view, sometimes we forget the bigger picture on the customer's side, and so it's kind of easy for us to come in and say, this is the way it should be, here's
Yeah.
the bright future you're going towards. But reality is that, there's stakeholders, there's, like you say, there's people that need to be convinced, and they have their own interests, and blah 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 blah. I guess what I've seen, all I can really speak to is what I've seen work, and there's a couple of approaches. So obviously the most effective and widespread is if you have the ability to get in front of someone very high in the organization, and show them that there's a new way, and that you can see sort of what that future could look like for the organization, then obviously that would be ideal, right?
Okay.
That's not always going to be available. And so I think what I've seen worked is, again, very similar to what we used to see at Tableau, which is really short, focused project, clear outcome, and you can deliver that, and show value very quickly. And through that, you almost build the buy-in, because it's so concrete, right? It's something that people can right away understand, see, touch, feel, right? It's something they can't, it's not like a concept. It's not this lofty dream. It's something right now that can add value. And so I think it's the same thing that we see at Snowflake, where you focus on a use case or a business area where there's a big room for growth that will benefit, and then you start there, right? You kind of try not to boil the ocean, and you do it that way. I think that's a smarter
difficult
approach.
one. Yeah, that's a difficult one. Usually companies and people, they want to go from 0 to 100 in one step, right? And that's the worst, because it's not possible, right? It's a process, it's a journey. It will take a few weeks, months, years maybe, to create that desired situation where everything's perfect, everything's in the cloud. So yeah, I think you're right. It's just, the message would be, take it one step at a time, and try to understand this is something that is here to stay. The cloud computing is not going anywhere, and people need to realize that as well.
And I guess the way to think about it is more, it's something you build on. So you start with those pieces, and then those are the foundational pieces that you then build upon, rather than, trying to rip the whole thing out. Because yes, it can work, and yes, it does happen, but I think the risk is higher. It takes longer usually at the beginning, and also it's not just about doing the things, it's about getting everyone on board, changing the culture, right? It's all of those other surrounding things that become, like you say, people are resistant to change. So bringing them on that journey becomes part of what you need to think about.
Yes, you're right. I think implementing a technology is easy these days compared to compared to changing the culture of how people do things, or how people think about stuff. That's the difficult part. And that's why I'm trying, with this, to educate more of our data people out there to be prepared, because changes are coming every day. In that aspect, do you see, you are now in a cloud computing company. How or what is coming? What is the next generation of cloud computing is going to look like? If you know something about it, something that you can share with us. What are big changes? We talk about AI. We talk about machine learning. What else? Or how those things are going to be now integrated in a way that is going to shape the future?
So there's obviously tons of areas that we see, like you're saying, the up and coming, and becoming more, I guess, integrated, and adding real value, right? Especially with the AI side of things. I think when AI first started picking up, it was quite conceptual, but nowadays you hear some real use cases, and that's what excites me about that space. But it's probably a pretty biased answer, but I think what we see, and something you'll probably hear about a lot more as the year goes on is the sharing of data and that whole data economy, data marketplace.
Okay.
Because even today, you think about how many organizations share data using very primitive methods.
Yeah.
Manual
Flat files,
uploads,
CSV.
flat files, FTP, sending files on email. It's pretty crazy because it's not just it's most organizations, even if they themselves are quite advanced in their data usage. When it comes to sharing, they're like, oh yeah, we just send something over email every week, and you're like, what? And they don't think so. People haven't really. It's sort of like, yep, that's how it is. We accept it. But I think we're seeing that change.
Okay.
And that's super exciting. Obviously, as long as there's the security and
of course,
governance
yeah,
piece of it, which that's
piece.
very important. But I think what we're seeing that's super exciting is, this idea of whatever data you use as an organization, which then can add value to another organization, you can share right away without added overhead, or at least without a huge amount of overhead. You can also track it much better. You can govern it much more securely, right? And so there's all these benefits of doing it in a way that is less manual and
that's
less,
interesting. Yeah, that's going to be a big change.
Old school.
Yeah. Another topic that I usually receive from people is how do I monetize my data? I want to go on, because it's another, keyword that is out there, data monetization. I want it. I don't know what it is. I just need it. And I'm assuming, this kind of solution that Snowflake's putting together is going to facilitate that. I'm assuming, right?
It already is. In the US, this is much bigger than it is here in Australia right now. But, if you think about, because we have on the data marketplace all sorts of open source information, like weather information, benchmarking, and all of that. So if you think about a retail store wanting to integrate that into their own store and store sales or whatever, they're able to do that right away and not have to have a huge amount of added effort. The other thing is, data monetization and being on the marketplace. One thing I think people maybe don't think enough about is that sharing of data is something that the mechanism is going to become super easy, but it's all of this, again, the surrounding process and methodology that, exactly. Like a company that hasn't done it before, it's not like they can just pick it up and, have it right away. So I think it's more thinking about how you're going to do chargebacks, how you're going to, handle security, how you're going to do all those pieces, because the actual sharing of it is going to be super, super easy and seamless. And what we can do now already is, share data across clouds. We can share data with read-only accounts that, so there's all sorts of options there. I think it's more the surrounding process.
Yeah, cool. So final question on the tips and ideas and recommendations.
Yeah.
If someone is thinking about becoming an expert on data cloud or data warehouse in the cloud, and they're thinking between AWS, Azure, which one should I, because there's so many, right? Like, should I get a Google Cloud? Should I go with Amazon Redshift? What should I do? What would you recommend them looking into Snowflake as an option as well? And how they will go about that?
Of course, I'm so biased. You can't ask me that. Look, even beyond or even before, saying like, oh, do I do a certification with AWS or with Azure or with whatever? I think ultimately that stuff is generally, in my opinion anyway, easier to pick up than you would think. I think for me, getting involved with, like meetups and, actually talking to people about what they're doing, and that for me is more valuable if you can get involved. Whether you're looking at just doing contract work potentially for project-based stuff. I'm a learner that learns on the job, so for me personally, that's the best way I learn. So I would always say, if you can, get your hands dirty and just throw yourself in somewhere.
That's a good advice.
because at the end of the day, you can sit there and you can take, 80 hours of courses and get your certifications, but really what people want is real experience. And I think what's the value add is knowing how to piece it all together and knowing where the gotchas are, because not all these platforms have their own little quirks too, right? And you're not going to learn that through their cert, because they're going to make it look like it's
That's
the best
true.
thing ever. So I think for me, just as much as possible, talk to real people, talk to real use cases, find out what people are doing, ask questions. Like network is invaluable, right? So I would always focus there. And then certifications are always nice to have if you have the means and the time. People probably have the time now, so
that's
AWS
true.
is still very much the forerunner, but locally Azure is coming up like crazy, and so some of the Azure services that have been spun up, and they've caught up very quickly to what AWS started off with. So
And by the way, Snowflake
either one of
runs
those.
on all those clouds, right?
Yes. So globally, we're across all three, but locally, we're only AWS and Azure. So in Australia, we're across the two. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. So, well, Kelly, I don't want to take much of your time. Thank you very much. It's getting late and I can see this dark behind you. So thank you for spending some time with us today talking. And and if people want to reach out to you, follow you on either LinkedIn or another social media, where can people can reach out to you? How?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the only social media I'm on, I think.
Really?
Maybe I'm on Twitter still, but I'm not active. So I probably won't respond there. So yeah, LinkedIn is definitely
awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to put anyway the details down below this video, probably somewhere. So you can just click it there and follow Kelly on her amazing journey. And thank you very much again for being here. Wish you all the best. Hopefully we can catch up then someday for a coffee. Hopefully if these things, change in some way and we open the borders and we can travel again, I think we have the chance to get together.
Yeah, would love to. Thanks for having me. That was really fun.
No worries. Thank you, Kelly. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too.
Thank you for tuning into the podcast today. Hopefully you found that interesting and insightful. We thank Kelly, of course, for her time and for all the comments and recommendations that she gave us. If you think this is interesting to you, let me know in the comments or send me an email again, and I will make sure to keep including topics like this in the podcast. Also, if you are a data professional looking to improve your skills, not just technical skills, but also business skills and data leadership, then you might consider joining our Data Mastermind. So if you click the button below or you go to www.datasquad.com.au/join, you will be able to see what the Data Mastermind is all about. You can consider joining. It's a monthly subscription. It's it's a new offer, something new in the market. And there is no commitment. You can join at any time. And if you are not happy with what you see or what you receive, you can cancel your subscription at any time. So the Data Mastermind includes two main components. One is going to be the lessons itself and the master classes in an e-learning platform, and the other component is the community. A community of peers like yourself looking to improve their skills, to upskill whatever area of the data professional needs. So if you want to join, just click the button and I will see you there. I will see you again next Friday with another podcast.